It's Only Sport with Martin Devlin on the platform. Brought to you by One New Zealand. Let's get connected.
Christy Doran from The Raw over in Australia joins us here on the platform on It's Only Sport. Christy, first off, All Blacks 33, Wallabies 13, final match of the Rugby Championship for both sides. Did we learn anything new about either?
It's a good question, Lockie, and it's good to hear your voice, much better than that man Marty's. But it's a good question because I always thought that the real litmus test for the Wallabies was going to be this next fixture. We know that they came back and they had a great last 20 minutes in Sydney, and then they followed it up with another really impressive 20 minutes. But what we've discovered about this Wallaby side for quite a few years is the inability to play 60 to 80 minutes of good rugby. And that's still the concern. It's the concern heading up north to the Northern Hemisphere where there's a Grand Slam tour. Wallabies haven't won all 4 tests in that Grand Slam since 1984. So we'll find out a fair bit more. Joe Schmidt will find out a fair bit more about the depth that he's got, the cattle that he's got, whether or not any of these emerging players can become stars. Because what we've discovered about the All Blacks is that they've got one in Wallace Satiti. What a player he's going to turn out to be. And he's the most exciting player that's come out of this Rugby Championship so far. So that's the great learning the lesson and discovery from the All Blacks perspective is that number 6 jersey, which had been up in the air for quite a while, no Shannon Frizzell, well, you've got a good one in Satiti.
Thoroughly agree, and it's actually quite encouraging because it seems that we always have a group of players, I'm sure you guys do this over in Australia, we have a group of players that we think are the future. We get told that this guy's going to be the next captain, this guy's going to be this guy in 10 years or whatever, and it's always a guy sort of pops up out of the blue. Shannon Frizzell sort of was that as well. Just with the Wallabies though, when you look at the Rugby Championship, 1 win from 6, I've read an article here just talking about how 1 in 5 and finishing last is about where you guys expected to be. Is that true? Are you happy with 1 in 5?
Oh, absolutely. I was on a podcast about 2 months ago with Sam Bruce from ESPN, and he said to me, if the Lions, I think the Lions about 1.5 wins, and he thought that there'd be less than that 1.5 wins. I thought, and I actually agreed, I thought that they would jag one in Argentina. I thought they were a chance against the Box, but as it turned out, even with the second string Box side that they rolled out in Perth, the Wallabies were just not good enough at the time. And I think that is where they are at the moment. As you say, look, there's elements of their game. You can see the detail starting to come through Joe Schmidt's game plan, but there's just not enough of it. There's not enough world-class players. And I wrote throughout the championship ahead of the Blues, like, there's probably only one player that would have competed for a position in the starting 15 of an All Black side, and there might be 3 or 4 in a 23, and that's the difficulty they've got at the moment, is finding 3 to 4 to 5 world-class players over the next 12 months and developing them. There's a lot of young guys like Jeremy Williams who have promising futures. They're 23. You need to start to see those guys that are 23 have 30 to 40 caps to start to really challenge for top-tier international games. And at the moment, there's just not enough of them.
Yeah, one thing I picked up on, at least my lack of knowledge around rugby compared to the players and coaches and even guys like yourself, but at least in the, not exactly this weekend's test just been, but in Sydney, was that the structure was there. You talked about there, the blueprint, Joe Schmidt's type of coaching, his game. You could see it, and it was just things were being let down by lack of talent. I mean, it feels like guys like Noel Olesea, for example, has been tried in that position for a long time, and it never really quite kicked on as the 10 of the future. If you had to sit there and sort of grade the future, does it look bright? You talked about how you've got these players, people are talking about them, you're not really seeing enough of them, but are you happy to hang your hat on some of those names that you just listed before?
Oh, there's some good players. Angus Bell, 23, he would have challenged for that All Blacks, and maybe off the bench. He's a really good running prop. We're starting to see him develop his scrummaging. Taniela Tupou, obviously, we've been talking about his potential for 7 years, but he just hasn't developed into that international player who can play 50 minutes of rock-solid, explosive rugby, and that's what we need to see. I think Joe Schmidt is the man that can take these players to the next level. But you made mention, and it's a really good point, the 10 conundrum. Noel Olesea, the conundrum of him. He made his debut in Sydney against the All Blacks in 2020. Have we seen enough progression over his time? I don't think we have. But at the same time, we threw this guy out as a 20-year-old. Richie Mo'unga wasn't 20 when he was being given the All Blacks number 10 jersey. Marcus Smith wasn't 20 either when he was the number 10 for the England. They had 100-odd games or around that number of top-level professional rugby before they were thrown into the cauldron. Noah had a dozen games. So, yes, it's a challenge for the Wallabies to find out who the 10 is, because I think they're the two positions where Australian rugby is really struggling at the moment, 10 and 12. And you can't have a 10 and 12, two players that are going to struggle at the international level. You look at all the World Cups and all the top sides, great, outstanding 10s and 12s, from Andre Pollard and Damien D'Orlando for the Box and recent additions to Mar Nonu and Dan Carter before that. England obviously had Johnny Wilkinson. Green was in the centres. And Horn and Larkham before that with the Wallabies. So they need to work out if Noah are going to be the 10 next year at the Lions. There's still the jury out. The benefit that he's had, and this is, I think, a smart decision from Joe Schmidt, is he's given him the extended run in that 10 jersey to work out, to establish, can you take grip of that jersey? I don't think he has. He certainly hasn't locked it up. But who else is the alternative? Because at the moment, you're not giving Ben Donaldson the number 10 jersey against the Lions, nor is Tom Lyon physically and mentally probably tough enough at that point. He's pulled out of a lot of games in test weeks because of his hamstring niggles and the lack of confidence in his hamstring. So who else might it be? Perhaps Tane Edmond. You can look overseas, but Quade Cooper's not getting any younger, is he? He's 35, 36, and similarly Bernard Foley. So once upon a time, you could still turn to those guys because they were 33, 34. They're 2 years further down, and it very much looks like Joe Schmidt's turned a new page on the 10 jersey. I just don't know if there's enough time to develop any of the 10s in Aussie rugby into a top-class fly half. And similarly, Hunter Paisami, good Super Rugby player, but there is a step up to the international cauldron, and I don't know if we've seen the error rate drop enough for him to be considered a top-quality 12 at the moment. He's still pretty young, in his mid-20s, but we need to start to see him really establish himself, because he gave the ball away way too easily in that first half when the Wallabies had scored points. They'd made a really promising 40-metre surge, and then he needs to take the ball, tuck it under his wing, a quick recycle. It doesn't do that, turns over possession, and it releases the momentum that the Wallabies had got in that first 10 minutes against the ABs in Wellington.
It's Only Sport with Martin Devlin on the platform. Brought to you by One New Zealand. Let's get connected.